Hello everyone, this is the sentence diagram explanation video for week 10, focusing on passive and active constructions, the passive and active voice. First thing I want to point out that your directions specifically request that you change any passive sentences to the active voice. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, passive voice is inherently a weak construction. And so often if you submit a paper with passive, your teacher will identify that and ask you to change it. So we want to just get used to working with the stronger active construction. Secondly, if we were diagramming sentences in the passive voice, it just becomes really confusing because things have moved around as far as where they are and how they're functioning. And in some cases, there wouldn't even be a sentence pattern to match the diagram. So the first thing you need to do on this assignment is identify whether the sentence is active or passive. If it is passive, then you need to change it to active before you diagram. You can either write out the sentence in the passive voice, or you can work from the sentence you already have and just diagram it in its active form, in its active voice. I've given you a couple of hints here also to help you understand and identify passives and then change it to the active voice. So the first thing you want to look at is verbs, and I've underlined the verbs here. Passive constructions are going to have a form of the be verb. It could be past, present, past, present, singular, plural. So you're going to have the be verb, and then it's going to be followed by the past participle of the main verb. So if it's a regular verb, it's going to be that ed form. If it's irregular, it'll be something different. But that's what you want to look for, is be plus the past participle of the verb. Those verbs are often sandwiched by two nouns. Sometimes the second noun is omitted because the idea of passives is that you don't have a clear sense of who is doing the acting, who is doing the verb in the sentence. And sometimes that's inadvertent and sometimes it's deliberate that that's left out. So sometimes this second noun won't be there. But generally speaking, it's still implied. You have the two nouns surrounding the verb. The second noun is often preceded by the preposition by. So that's another thing you can look for. So you've got your two nouns, your two nouns, your verbs, and then the preposition. The other way you can determine is to look at the main verb, figure out what the action is, and then determine who is doing the action. So in this case, we have name. And who is doing the naming? The students are doing the naming. Students name Poe. So when we're rewriting the sentence, we're going to put it back in the syntactical order that we're used to, with subject, verb, and then our object following. So we have students. The noun here is our subject. Students name. This passive construction is in the present tense, as evidenced by the be verb. So we're going to keep it in the present tense. Students name Edgar Allan Poe is our direct object, and then we can finish the rest of the sentence as their favorite author. So we have a noun in the predicate, which is functioning as a subjective complement, clarifying Poe. So we stick that at the end. We put the as up on the little ledge here because it doesn't really have meaning, and then we just stick in our modifiers. The direct object often is answering when, so that's an adverb, and our two modifiers for our noun here. So subject, action verb, direct object, noun as the objective complement makes that a pattern 10. This one is active because we have our subject verb construction. He is doing the writing. So we put our subject verb here, and he's writing what? He's writing 4 different things: reviews, criticism, poetry, and fiction. So we do our little bracketed structure so that we have 4 direct objects. The literary adjective comes off of criticism. They're all joined by the conjunction. And we have subject, verb, direct objects, makes that a pattern 7. Next one is active as well, with subject verb. He created what? Characters and plots are our 2 nouns. So again, we have the little bracketed structure to show that we have 2 direct objects here. The tricky thing about this one is the adjective bizarre, and there are a couple of ways of going about this. You're probably, I don't know, your initial impulse is going to be to put bizarre under characters because it's modifying that noun, which is correct. That's not incorrect. But probably the more accurate way of reading this, and especially if you know Poe, he creates both characters and plots that are bizarre. So the understanding here is that the bizarre adjective is modifying both nouns. And to show that, we put it on that main line after the direct object, vertical line, but before it splits, to show that that bizarre is modifying both character and plots. So we have subject, action verb, direct objects, again, a pattern 7. Another fairly straightforward construction, we have narrator here, and he is doing the action of commit, and murder is the object. So that's the pattern 7, and then we can just put the definite article and the prepositional phrase in to clarify what narrator we're talking about. This is probably the most difficult sentence of the entire assignment for a lot of reasons. So let's look and see if it's passive or active first. If we look at our verbs, we have was murdered, which is the be plus the past participle. And then in our next clause, we have was buried. So good indication that this is a passive construction. Who is being murdered? It's the victim. The victim is not doing the murdering. He's being murdered. We don't have a clear idea of who the subject is in this sentence. And it's kind of contextual because we just read in the last sentence that it's the narrator who commits murder. If you've read The Telltale Heart, you know that the narrator is male, so it's going to be a he. So because there is no clear sense of who's doing the action grammatically in the sentence, we insert the pronoun he. So you kind of have to just put that in on your own. He murdered. Past tense is our subject, and murdered what? The victim. So we have subject, action verb, direct object. And then we have a couple of prepositional phrases. In his bed is telling us where he was murdered. So that goes under the verb as an adjective, or sorry, adverb. And for no logical reason is answering the question why, which is also an adverb question. So it goes under the verb. So we have the two prepositional phrases there, and then we just put the possessor for the victim. And the first clause is done. We put our and connecting the two clauses in that bracket. We're still functioning off the same implied subject. This time we have our verb is buried. And now we have kind of an unclear buried what or buried whom. It's back to this idea of victim. His victim was murdered and buried. So we're going to stick him, the pronoun him, in there to refer back to victim. So he buried him, subject, action, verb, direct object. Beneath the floor is where, an adverb question, and then is also answering the question of when, which is an adverb question. So both of these are pattern 7s with he, action verbs, and direct objects. You're going to see that with passive and active verbs, there are a lot of pattern 7s because the whole idea of passives is that you're reversing the direct object and the subject. And that main sentence pattern of subject, verb, direct object is a pattern 7. There's sometimes going to be added elements, but you're going to see that pattern 7 come up a lot today. For this one, it's we're going to skip that first clause and skip right to the verb. And we have, again, is questioned. Be verb plus the ed form, the past participle. We have our two nouns, and we have a by. All good indications that this is passive. Who is doing the questioning? It's the policeman. So we change the order to get the subject preceding the verb. So the policeman questions whom? The narrator. That's our basic sentence. And then we put our little phrase at the beginning here. At the end of the story is answering the question when. So it's going to go under the verb. So this is a pattern 7, subject, verb, direct object. This one again is an active construction, but we've got a couple of clauses going on. So we'll start with the first one. The subject for the first one is narrator, and he hears what? A heartbeat. And then we have our relative pronoun here. So there's our first clause. Subject, action verb, direct object makes this a pattern 7. That grows increasingly louder is a relative clause that's explaining heartbeat, telling us more about what's going on with that heartbeat. So we connect that noun heartbeat with a relative pronoun that's functioning as the subject in our next sentence. That Grows is an action verb. Louder is an adjective. So we have subject, linking verb, grows. Louder is our adjective pattern 4, and then the adverb is modifying the adjective louder. The sound is probably made by his own heart. Again, we have is made, 2 nouns and a by. So this is going to be passive. What is making the sound? It's his heart. So his heart is doing the action and is the subject. It goes first. Heart makes sound, subject, verb, direct object, and then we just put our modifiers in. And that is a pattern 7. The thunder sound may have been caused by his guilty conscience. Passive construction. It's his conscience that is causing. We're going to keep the may have because those are helping verbs. And so we have conscience as subject, may have caused is our verb. Caused what? The sound is the direct object, and then the modifiers go below. Pattern 7. He finally confesses his crime. So here we have subject doing that verb of confessing. Subject, action verb, confesses what? His crime is the direct object, and then to the policeman is the indirect object, making this a pattern 8 sentence. Poe led, subject, verb, led what? Life. Subject, verb, direct object with the 2 modifiers going under pattern 7. Short and sweet. He was denied his inheritance by his guardian. Again, the be verb, the past participle, the noun, and that by tell us it's passive. So who's doing the denying? It's the guardian. The guardian, past tense, denied what? An inheritance is what's being denied. So we put that as the direct object, and it's being denied to the he becomes a him because it's an object, indirect object. Subject, action verb, direct object, indirect object makes that another pattern 8 sentence. At the age of 27, he married his 13-year-old cousin Virginia. I won't even comment on that. Let's start with the main sentence is he married, subject, verb. He married whom? His cousin is the noun. Virginia is her name, and that's just clarifying cousin. So this is functioning as an appositive. It follows that direct object in parentheses. And then we just put the modifiers. His and 13-year-old are modifying cousins. At the age of 27 is a prepositional phrase that's answering the question when. So an adverb underneath the verb. He took, subject, verb. He took what? An overdose is the subject, the direct object here. He took overdose, subject, action verb, direct object. Our 2 modifiers, we have an article and a prepositional phrase clarifying what that overdose was. And after Virginia's death is a prepositional phrase answering the question when. Functioning as an adverb, so it goes below the verb. Pattern 7 on that one. Scholars still debated the cause of his death a few years later. So we have scholars doing the debating, subject, verb, and they're debating what? Cause. So there's our subject, verb, direct object, and then we just stick things in. Still is conveying a notion of time, so that's going to be an adverb. A few years later is again answering when. So this goes here. There's no preposition, so our noun goes on the horizontal with the modifiers below. Definite article, and then the cause of death is the prepositional phrase modifying cause. So this is subject, verb, and direct object. And that is all, 15 whole sentences. I hope this is making sense, that you can understand the difference between active and passive voices, how to change them, and how to diagram them.